Donald Trump is missing in action. He should be on this stage tonight. He owes it to you to defend his record.
And Donald Trump should be here to answer for that, but he's not. And I want to look at that camera right now and tell you, Donald, I know you're watching. You can't help yourself. I know you're watching, okay? And you're not here tonight, not because of polls and not because of your indictments. You're not here tonight because you're afraid of being on the stage and defending your record.
With just a few months until voters start heading to the polls, 7 Republicans running for president met for a second debate this week. And for the first time, some directly called out frontrunner and former President Donald Trump. Well, Paul Kendrick is the executive director of Rust Belt Rising, a political research firm. He joins me this morning. Paul, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
So the debate happens this week, and lots of chit chat on the, on TV and elsewhere about, who won. But the thing is, isn't it more important to ask, did any candidate make a dent in the leadership position of former President Trump? Because isn't that what matters?
That's exactly right. We have to contextualize this debate as happening with one person, Donald Trump, up by 40 points as much as in polls. And so one poll had Ramaswamy winning the debate, one poll had DeSantis, and then Nikki Haley. It's possible that you could have an upset in an early primary state and use that for momentum to carry one of these folks forward. But right now, winning this debate is like a football team kicking a field goal, looking up at the scoreboard, and you're still down by 30. So it's possible to win, but the probability is not looking good.
So we know most of the candidates are, for whatever reason, not going after the former president. Chris Christie is making it his MO, not doing well in the polls. Maybe that's why the rest of them aren't. But this time around, 3 of them said, "Where is Trump? You should be here." Why does that not even make a dent?
Yeah, so Trump has about 40% baked in right now. And then of the remaining 60% of the Republican primary electorate, less than half of them don't like Trump. So you have a lot of folks that like Trump, but they're Trump curious, they're looking around. And so Chris Christie having a very anti-Trump message, that's only playing to about 25% of their party. A Republican who doesn't like Trump is probably an independent at this point because of how he's reshaped and redefined the party. And so Trump's in a strong position because he's got his 40%. If he just brings home 1 in 3, 1 in 4 of the people who like him but are looking around, he has a majority that is unbeatable, whereas other folks have to have all the anti-Trump quarter and then most of the folks who are looking at everyone. That's hard for one candidate to do.
So that would explain why the "where is he" maybe isn't enough. In fairness to the candidates, they weren't asked one question about the indictments, about his comments about General Milley, suggesting that the former Joint Chiefs leader should have been executed or something. Why doesn't any of that, do you think, make a dent in Trump supporters?
I think this primary is really about the strategies people are putting in place with this fundamental conundrum of the popularity, the enduring popularity of Trump with Republican voters. So look at DeSantis, who's been seen as the most likely alternative. He tried at first to say, hey, I'm MAGA through and through, but just, in a fresh package. And that's kind of what Ramaswamy is doing. But the primary voters were saying, well, we'll just take Trump. We'll take the real thing, thanks. And so now he's trying to run to Trump's right and saying, I passed a 6-week abortion ban. Anti-abortion voters, you can trust me even more than Trump. The problem for him is Trump overturned Roe v. Wade via defeating Hillary Clinton in the justices he appointed. So that's a tough sell. Trump's white evangelical base is among his most loyal voters, but DeSantis is seeing maybe in Iowa I can pull some of them off and getting upset.
Of course, when asked about the 6-week, DeSantis always says, hey, I won in a landslide, except that 6-week maneuver he made came after that landslide, pretty much in the dark of night. Yep. What did you think of Trump's strategy? He didn't just stay home. He took the night, went to Michigan, spoke to what was a non-union house, but nevertheless, talking about union issues that night.
Yeah, that's probably the most important thing that happened this week. Biden being on the picket line with UAW workers, Trump going to Michigan in this non-union shop. They are having a general election debate about who's going to be better for working people. I had a Biden advisor tell me he staked his presidency on making life better for those who didn't get to go to college and creating good jobs for all and securing health care and retirement. But then Trump is making often a very cultural appeal to these workers, and as well as saying, oh, I'll fix the private sector and making an economic nationalist populist appeal. And they're also debating whether making electric vehicles is, as Biden thinks, a great opportunity in this transition to a clean economy, that we want these jobs in our industries we used to do. So will workers ultimately be optimistic and forward-looking, or looking back union, Trump anti-union, but who do the workers believe?
If there is a Biden-Trump showdown, ultimately, a lot of people predict that, but there's been some writing lately of people who are saying they probably won't debate at all. They don't need to. Trump because he never has to, and Biden because his staff is worried. What is your thought about a Trump-Biden debate? Should it happen? Not? Why?
Well, ever since the first presidential debate, which happened in Chicago, in Streeterville versus Kennedy and Nixon, this has been a real American tradition. And it's the one time other than the election itself where I think people really focus in on politics. So Biden is an institutionalist. He cares about democracy. He'll want a debate. And I think Trump won't be able to resist the attention. And ultimately, both think they can defeat each other. They think pretty low of each other. And ultimately, that reflects both parties who don't really believe they could lose to the other one. You know, Democrats are so shocked Trump won in 2016, work to win it.
Paul Kendrick with Rust Belt Rising. Fascinating stuff. We'll talk to you again because this is incredible information.
Thank you so much for
About
having me.
the election. Thank you so much. One more break and we're coming back.